gentlemen. So let me say good morning in semaphore, okay? It's G-O-O-D-M-O-R-I-N-G. Good morning. My rate in the Navy was a signalman. We did the flashing light, the semaphore, and the flag hoist. That's how we maneuvered ships. In Vietnam, I would say 70% of the communication was done visually. Very little radio at all. Let me just put this over here. How many know who this is up here? Who are these guys? Who? That's it. My inspiration to go in the Navy. I was a baby boomer, born January 1st, 1946, and I grew up on World War II movies, black and white. Sands of Iwo Jima, a guy named Joe, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. The Fighting Sullivans was the one that inspired me. I watched that whole movie, not a lot about the Navy, except for the fact that they had perished, but it was their childhood growing up together as 5 brothers in Waterloo, Iowa. And that last scene, how many saw the movie, The Fighting Sullivans? In that last scene, if you remember, the smallest brother is saying, "Hey guys, wait for me," or "Hey fellas, wait for me." I said, I'm going to be a Navy man. And so it was that made my inspiration. All right, I think I just push a button. There's the ship that they perished on, the USS Juno, on Eternal Patrol. We have many ships on Eternal Patrol right now. But the Juno was a cruiser. And that was me 40-some years ago. I went in between my junior and senior year in high school, bound and determined I was going to be a tin can sailor. That's a destroyer man. So I went to boot camp, and the first surprise I had was when we got to San Diego for boot camp, they had just shut the entire training center down. 5 guys had died from spinal meningitis. So they sent us out to Coronado Island, and that's where I did my boot camp. Went back, finished my senior year, and in June I headed to San Diego to pick up my first ship, which was the USS Morton DD-948. I'm not sure which one they're going to show. That's just what is called a tin can sailor. Proud group of guys. You can see the depth charges that they no longer have, but most everything is now ASROC or missile type anti-submarine warfare. But it can get pretty rough on a destroyer. We've got some destroyer guys in here. My first ship, the USS Morton, Force class destroyer, beautiful ship. And you never forget your love for your first ship. I mean, it's always your special ship. I started out on the deck force. From the deck force, I started getting interested on the signal bridge. Met a couple guys up there, and they started training me. And before long, before we got underway for Westpac, I was a signalman. Let me just say something. It's easy to hear Morse code, the rhythm. For instance, a C, Charlie, is da, dit, da, dit. Okay? To see that, though, and not hear it is more difficult. So when we would train a striker, they would right away start picking up the code. And we teach the code by opposites. For instance, Alpha, dit, da, is the opposite of November, da, dit. Bravo, da, dit, 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 is the opposite of Victor, or victory, dit, 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 da. So we would teach them by opposites, and they would learn the code, they would start practicing it, but they could always hear it, but they could never see it. So when they would get on a light for the first time, maybe try to talk to a striker on another ship, it just really threw them off because they could no longer hear the rhythm of the code. So it takes a special effort to learn how to read the code and not hear the code. But we got underway in 1964 for our first Westpac cruise. I was a seaman, and we were in company with, I'm going to say, at least 10 other destroyers. And we were around a heavy cruiser at the time, the USS Columbus, and we were the destroyer screen. And our ship was the destroyer commander. So everything we did was done by flag hoist when we wanted to maneuver the entire group. So I learned quickly the signalman rate. The screen commander, which was the cruiser, he would give us the orders and we would follow through with them. I got to know very well a guy named Captain Nelson, who was the head of the screen. I would route a lot of messages to him as a seaman, and he said, "Would you like to go to Annapolis or to Naval Academy?" And I told him no. To this day, I regret it. But I had an opportunity that he would have given me a recommendation. When we got over to Westpac, on the way we started hearing about Vietnam. This is 1964. And the scuttlebutt around the ship was, where's Vietnam? We never heard of it before. And then we started hearing about the Maddox, and we started hearing about the Turner Joy and the Maddox being attacked in the Gulf of Tonkin. And then we found out, as we transited to a place called Subic Bay, which is the main naval station, that in Yokosuka, Japan, in the Philippines. When you're in a wartime situation, everything that's done as far as repairs, replenishing the ship, is usually done at Subic Bay. But on our way to Subic, we heard that we were going to relieve the Turner Joy and the Maddox in the Gulf of Tonkin. Now keep in mind, we just found out where Vietnam was. And so we get into Subic, we get underway. That night, Captain Schneider comes over the intercom, and he said, we're going back in the Gulf. Now, by the way, these things were called DeSoto patrols. They were done since the 60s, but what it was meant to do is to let the North Vietnamese know that the Gulf waters off the coast of North Vietnam were international waters. So we went in these, as soon as we relieved the Turner Joy and the Maddox, we went right back into the Gulf with the USS Edwards, another Forrest Sherman-class destroyer. And the second night in, about 7:30, we came under attack. And it was shortly after that second attack that the airstrikes began in Vietnam. So just getting out of high school and seeing my first combat was a surprise. What's going on here? Okay, the destroyers were primarily getting away from the Gulf of Tonkin. The destroyers primarily had various missions over there. Number one was naval gunfire support, NGSF. We supported our guys in country. Another thing we did was plane guard duty, where we would sit behind a carrier, and if one of the pilots came in and the helo couldn't pick him up, we would pick up that pilot. Many of us today who sat behind these carriers can still taste the JP-5 that these guys flew with as fuel in our taste. It's something that seems to never go away. But again, naval gunfire support, and then we had a Russian trawler out there. Now you've heard how that Iran is harassing our destroyers right now. That's what this trawler would do. He would try to get in the path of a carrier doing airstrikes to divert the carrier off course. Our job was to run screen and keep that trawler from doing that. But that was a third thing that we did over there. But the Tin Can Navy was probably still something is my favorite. My next ship was the USS Porterfield. This is a World War II Fletcher-class destroyer. It was en route with the Hornet when she bombed Tokyo for the first time. She was one of the guard ships. Rough riding tin can. This destroyer had, I think I got a pointer here. It had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 5-inch 38 guns on it. She could do 32, even as much as 34 knots. And I remember the first time the USS Enterprise came over to what we call Yankee Station. I'll get in that in a minute. When she came over there, she was one of the only ships that could keep up with the Enterprise. Because when that Enterprise turned into the wind, and she was a nuke, she could move. But that's the USS Porterfield. Then I was on a Fram 2, the USS Agerholm. We call her the Aggie. And she had the ASROC here in the center. You can't really see it in this photo, and that's, by the way, Point Loma. But the Aggie had 3 5-inch 38 guns, dual barrel, as you can see. And she was the first ship to detonate a nuclear explosion using her ASROC. And I should have put a picture up of it, but she fired an ASROC missile, which was anti-submarine warfare, and you can see the big cloud in the background with her silhouetted in the front of it. But that's the Aggie. This is what we call Yankee Station. That's the big E there. But Yankee Station is where we did all of our flight ops during the Vietnam War. There would sometimes be several carriers on Yankee Station. And remember, every time a carrier would launch, there was always a tin can behind her or right nearby. But that's the Enterprise, and she still has her beehive dome. They took that off later on, but you could always tell the Enterprise because of that dome. Blue Water Navy, that's kind of, we have the Brown Water Navy in Vietnam, we have the Blue Water Navy. Somebody mentioned about Agent Orange. Right now, the Blue Water Navy, there's something like 99,000 of us who served in the Blue Water Navy off the coast of Vietnam that are having troubles with the Agent Orange after effects. And so far, the only country that's actually approved their Blue Water Navy for Agent Orange benefits is the country of Australia. So far, they've shut us down here in the United States. It's an active issue still, and I know it's going to be before the House and the Senate again, but we're entitled to no benefits at all. Even though because of the monsoon rains over there and that drainage of all those chemicals going into the Gulf, we feel that we probably showered in it, we probably cooked our food in it, so there was great exposure to the guys that served over there. The president of the Vietnam Veterans of America just passed away. Now he was brown water. He just passed away because of Agent Orange. But some of the common diseases associated with Agent Orange is diabetes type 2 and various cancers. That is the USS New Jersey, World War I. World War I. Isn't she beautiful though? Look at that. That's all the camouflage that they put on back then. But you have a ship out here, the Colorado, which looks a lot like it. By the way, that is one masterpiece. I just looked at it and just awed at it. But that's the original New Jersey. As you can see, she's got the wire racks. I'm not sure the size of the guns. They may have been 6 or 8 inch, but they were very small compared to the modern day battleships. As we look at the battleship, this is the Yamato. How many know how big the guns were on the Yamato? 18-inch guns. Who had more firepower, the Yamato or an Iowa-class battleship? You think the Yamato, right? Guess what? The New Jersey or the Iowa-class battleships, even going back into North Carolina, some of those battleships, had a better firing rate because they were less weight in the shells. Those 18-inch shells were just huge and did not have the range of, let's say, and I know that the New Jersey was around 2,400 apiece. So, but it would cut down on the range of that ship. But a beautiful ship, though. And how did she sink? Does anybody know? Yep, that's it. That's our Colorado. Isn't that a beautiful ship? You know, we always, and this is Old Navy, okay? Any sailor who served in the 60s and before refer to their ships as a she. You know why? Because that's the ship you're married to. And to have a lady aboard a ship is bad luck. Now today we have ladies on combat ships. I want to introduce to you right now my wife Joyce. Joyce and I have been married for 48 years, and we're hoping to hit 50 in a couple more. So, but that is the USS Colorado. A very beautiful ship, and the model out here. All right, the birth of an Iowa class. This is the Keel of the New Jersey. Keep in mind, Pearl Harbor was bombed on what day? 19. And they christened this ship December 7th, 1942. So this is the big J's keel. You've often heard you break a ship's keel and the ship's gone. I've got several slides just showing you how they were building her. You can see here the gun tubs for the 16-inch shell, barbettes and so on. That's her forecastle here. By the way, one thing I might mention, on the New Jersey, the history of that ship is written in the inside. Now, example is we had a fan room on the signal bridge. Now, I don't know why the Navy does this, but this particular fan room was like this, and it must have had 80 bolts to hold that fan cover onto that fan area. 80 bolts that you had to undo to get into it. Well, they had it undone while we were putting the ship into commission for Vietnam, and our whole signal gang signed it. But you know what else? There was a signal gang from Korea. There was a signal gang from World War II. But all throughout that ship, it's just filled with yard workers and guys that had served on her. They're everywhere. And they're all hidden away. But you remove a hatch of some type, and there's all these signatures of guys, and it gives the date and all that. There they are, letting her slide down. Massive, isn't it? By the way, we could fit through the Panama Canal. There she is entering the water for the first time. That's one of the barbette areas that the 16-inch turrets are going to go into. Just imagine the wiring and the technician, or the technical things that had to go into one of these 16-inch guns. That's an actual lowering one of the turrets into the barbette area. Here you can see her commission. Let's make sure I didn't skip a slide. Okay. Here you can see the commission of her for World War II. Getting ready to go to war. That's just a picture. They're still working on her, and I'll just kind of point out some things. Lots of anti-aircraft guns. Here's your 5-inch 38s along the side. But they had anti-aircraft guns. Here's anti-aircraft guns. This thing was glistening with armament. She had, on each side, she had 5-inch 38 dual barrel mounts. Okay? 5 of them. And by the way, they had a louder crack than what the 16-inch guns had. I get a 10% disability from the VA because here's a signal bridge. I get a better thing of this signal bridge right here. And right below it, we'll be putting in a 5-inch gun there. And when they would fire that thing, they'd never tell you. And we never wore ear protection. They never had it back then for us. But that just gives you an idea of what it looked like as they're starting to, after she'd been slid down the rail. Another nice shot of the forecastle. See all the lines and stuff they had there. When I went across the equator in 1968 heading for Singapore, I was in the bullnose. This is what they call the bullnose. And I had a broom in my hand. And I was sweeping back and forth. And when a shellback came up to me and says, "What are you doing there, Pollywog?" I'd say, "Well, sir, I'm sweeping the horizon." But I mean, to become a shellback, and there's a couple of men here, is quite an experience. But that's the bullnose. Here's your bridge. This signal light is still there. I used it. This is the conning bridge up here. This is your flag bridge, what Halsey would have been. This was Halsey's flagship during World War II. She shared it with the Missouri. The peace treaty for World War II in Tokyo Bay was supposed to be done on the New Jersey. However, the president was from, and they put it on the Missouri. So, but here's the signal bridge right here. This is the flag bridge and the conning bridge. This is what it's called I called it a barbette. Sometimes it's called a citadel. But this is right below the conning bridge. And these doors, or hatches, are 18 inches thick. Imagine that. You have to hydraulically shut them. So you can see the width of them there. Inside this circular citadel, they had a helm, an engine order telegraph to the speed of the ship, periscopes going out the top of it, and they could actually maneuver the ship from inside there instead of the conning bridge. What a battleship was meant to do was to do battle against another battle wagon. So you could blow away the entire superstructure of the New Jersey, and you'd still have the gun turrets, you would still have the barbette, and you would still have the engineering spaces below the 18-inch water line, just above the water line there. Sea trials, World War II, they got her out to sea. Going out to sea after you've been in the yards for so long is such a cleansing experience. I mean, you get rid of all those hoses and all that, but that's her underway. Again, you can see a lot of the 5-inch 38s. You can see the anti-aircraft guns, but she's getting ready to go to war. Here's your 16-inch shells. They rock them back and forth when they want to put them into position for loading, but these things are massive. I remember in Norfolk we took on a bunch of them, and it was a job. They had them rolled on the deck 20, 30 at a time. This is them actually manhandling them in the turrets to put them in the position to fire. These are bags of powder filled with black powder. Many of you heard about the explosion on the Iowa. Some of the latest information I've heard on that is that between each bag they're supposed to put a piece of silk to keep the static electricity down, and evidently one was missed. But I know the Navy tried to cover it up, but it would take 3 to 5 of these, depending on what distance you wanted to send that 16-inch shell. There's more of the powder bags.
What did those powder bags weigh?
I would say around 300 pounds. They're pretty heavy. These are some of your anti-aircraft guns that were no longer in there. Matter of fact, Captain Schneider during Vietnam, on one of the anti-aircraft guns on both the port and starboard side, they were empty tubs. And they didn't take the round thing off, so you turned them into swimming pools. And so when you see some of the shots of New Jersey during Vietnam, you'll see that the inside these tubs on the port and starboard side of the bridge are blue. Okay? And he was the only one that swam them, by the way. He wouldn't allow us to do that. Here's Halsey. This is Fleet Admiral Halsey working with the crew. Let me say this. A good skipper or a good fleet admiral like Halsey, they get in with the crew. They become a part of that ship, and that includes the crew. But Halsey was known for that. Here's Halsey, and what was the other one? McCain. That would be the father of, that's it. But again, some of the key people during World War II. And this would be on the New Jersey also. I might add that one of the saddest things about Halsey's command was we didn't have a weather service during World War II. And they didn't know of an upcoming typhoon. I mean a bad one, Cat 5. And the destroyers were not able to refuel. And they hit that Cat 5, and many of them were lost. We're talking 300-400 men per ship. And I think that's something that Halsey took to his grave. But it wasn't Halsey's fault. He didn't know the typhoon was coming. But that's probably one of the saddest things about Halsey's whole naval career. This is the New Jersey during World War II. That's the carrier Intrepid, which is now a museum in San Diego, I believe. No, New York. Yeah, it's the Midway in San Diego. But you can see her, she's in pretty heavy seas here. That's just the oil painting of the same photo. I thought you might want to see that. That's just a silhouette of her outside of Tokyo Bay. Beautiful ship. One of the sad things about when they brought her in for her fourth commissioning in the 80s, they took the stinger off. That's what we call the stinger. And why they did it, I guess they just didn't think they needed it. But that's what makes an Iowa-class battleship, is that little stinger on the back.
What was that for?
To hoist planes on and off. The New Jersey during World War II had two catapults, one on the port and starboard side and on the fantail. And when the planes would land, they'd have the sea floats where they could land. They just pick them up with the crane. Plus, we use it even during Vietnam to bring out their things aboard. Here you can see she's being mothballed. World War II's over. By the way, when they mothball a ship, they put these cocoons all over the ship. You can see how many tugs. This is now Korea, and the Big J is getting ready to be recommissioned again. She still has her cocoons on. You see another heavy cruiser over here. I'm not sure which one that is, but she's also been mothballed. Here they're getting ready to move her. Reactivation, 1950, her second commissioning. That was the dignitaries that were there at that time. And here you see the actual commissioning service for it. And I'll get into the Vietnam commission in a second. This is just a picture of her in the North Atlantic. When we fire guns, whether they're 5-inch 38s, 50 caliber, or 16-inch guns, they always put up the Bravo flag. The Bravo flag is a warning to other ships that we're going to be firing. Here you see the Bravo flag up, and it looks like they're firing just a 5-inch. But that's the North Atlantic. You can see how rough the seas are there. And that's her in Korea. Once again, you still have the anti-aircraft guns on. Here they are here. So they haven't done much there. But you can see that's probably a 9-gun salvo right there. That's her off the coast of Korea. There you see the Stinger again. And then just before they deactivated, they put all 4 Iowa class together. So you got the USS Iowa, the USS New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin right here. Isn't that a beautiful shot? Now we're into Vietnam. Here they've got the ship ready to be pulled out. Just kind of give you an update. We lost a lot of pilots on close-in targets that took a lot of chances. The range of the New Jersey was over 24 miles that we could launch a shell. So in effect, we saved a lot of pilots' lives being able to use our 16-inch guns. But here they're getting ready to move her. There's the tugs putting her in position. This is Captain Schneider. He is a cruise captain. Best skipper we could have ever had. He just passed away in the last couple of years. But Captain Schneider was, like at commissioning, he ended up with this blue uniform coat, and he had a pair of white pants on. He was a very different skipper. He always tried to do things differently, but everybody loved him. He was also the signal officer. He went to Annapolis, but he was a signal officer on the USS Pennsylvania during World War II. So our skipper was quite talented in visual communication. We're in Philadelphia. I just finished pre-com school in LA. I'm sorry, in Long Beach. Anyways, to make a long story short, guy comes up the signal bridge and says, get your dress blues on and your shoes and go with this guy. Didn't tell me anything. So I went ahead and did what I was told. I go down the pier and there's a limousine waiting for me. So I get in the limousine and we start heading out. And I says, sir, do you mind telling me where we're going? He says, you mean they didn't say anything to you? I said, no. He says, you're going to be on the Mike Douglas show. So I ended up, this was aired in advance, but this is the sea chanters behind me, and they wanted me to send in semaphore the Mike Douglas show. That's what I was doing. I was second class at the time, my Vietnam ribbon's there. But what an experience. They had Glenn Ford on, so I know I at least was on the same stage as Glenn Ford, never got to talk to him, but one of the thrills of my life. This is me. We're in Long Beach, California, ready to get underway for Vietnam. I'm sitting on one of the flag bags. You can see the 12-inch searchlight right back here. By the way, I think I'm the only home on our block that has a 12-inch searchlight. I'm not kidding you. And I was in the basement. But you know where it is now? Garage. The garage. But I just love signaling. That was my whole life, you know. But I was second class. You can see a lot of the work being done in the background. By the way, we had dual flag bags on both the port and starboard sides. There was two sets of flag bags. I was sitting on the outer one on the starboard side there. I just wanted to bring this up because he was such a special person in my life. This is Chief Church. He was a gunner's mate. When they activated the New Jersey, they asked Chief to be part of the crew because he had fired the big guns during Korea. And Chief was special to me, and I just wanted to let you meet him, if I may.
Got enough years.
Yes. BB-62 doing sea trials. What a beautiful ship, huh? And there's her glistening guns. They added this area here for communication. Took all the anti-aircraft guns off of her. Basically, they have the 5.5-inch guns on both sides, 16-inch guns, and so on. We're testing them for the first time. They still work. I might share this story. The Yardbirds were on board when we did this firing. And they had high school lockers on the flag bridge, the one below the conning bridge. And they were the big tall ones. And they had the big long doors on them. When they fired turret 2, and keep in mind these lockers were right here, it took every one of those lockers and wrinkled them up like a piece of cardboard. All their tools were inside. But I mean, it's just amazing what our body can take as far as concussion. But they were surprised, to say the least. By the way, that barbette is right in here, and they just had it on the other side of the barbette. So here she is heading for Hawaii. Here is your port and your starboard swimming pools. Thought you might want to see those. Look at those teak wood decks. Now, we would do something in the Navy called holy stoning. And the holy stoning was, you would get it was the only sea chant still done in the Navy. But we would take a fire brick type thing. We put a solution down on the deck. We had a long pole in the hole of a fire brick. And we would get like 10 or 15 guys on each board, and we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, hit another board. And we would do 20 licks per board. And when we got done, those teak wood decks were unbelievable. The sun would bother you because it was so bright. By the way, does anybody know why ships of that era had wood decks? Anybody? Ricochet. When a shell would hit a ship and would hit that teak wood, it would stick and wouldn't ricochet. But that was the whole purpose of a teak wood deck. And right now, the biggest thing that the New Jersey is going through as a museum in Camden is the restoration of the teak wood. They're having to replace a lot of it. And I've got a piece to show you in a couple minutes. This is where I drank my coffee every morning. And we were talking about the galley making baked goods. And we could smell them coming through the stack. Donuts, rolls, all that. What a sight to have coffee, right? Look at those big 16-inch guns. But that's where I drink my coffee. That's taken right off the flag bridge. This is me signaling back in the Vietnam War. We're on the gun line. She has not added her Vietnam ribbons yet. There's your Korea back here. Here's your World War II. She had 14 battle stars for World War II. Is that incredible? But soon after that, they're going to be adding the Vietnam ribbons. Also, they're going to be, and I'll be showing those to you in a minute. They'll also be adding her time in Beirut. There's your 12-inch. We use these big eyes a lot. This is a 24-inch search that you can't really see. There's the lens of it. But the 24-inch had a tremendous range. Carbon arc. And if you couldn't raise a ship close by, you just lit off the 24-inch and started calling them. It would start to burn the paint on their bulkhead, and they would answer the light. But these things were unbelievable. You could talk to a ship by flashing light as long as you could see their superstructure above the horizon. Many ships I would talk to, I was only talking to their superstructure. Most of the ship had already gone under the horizon. This is the one I mentioned last month. This picture was on the front of the Denver Post the day she fired her guns for the first time. And that's the first time she fired in anger, and I've got a special thing I want to show you on that. This is Neil Leifer's photography. He gave me permission to use it. Here you can see the 16-inch guns, shells, projectiles actually leaving the barrel. Neil was with our ship. He was with Luke Magazine. Neil Leifer was with our ship from the day of commissioning all the way to the day we returned to the States. But he did several pictures, including that one where it shows me on the signal bridge. Tremendous photographer. His biggest thing in life was doing Muhammad Ali. He was Muhammad Ali's personal photographer. But that was one of the first times we fired. Here we are off the coast of Vietnam, firing in 1969. We fired from about November of 68 till around June of 69. R&R. Does anybody know what R&R is? Rest and recreation. Okay. Would you believe that we had guys from in-country, airborne, Green Beret, grunts, all of them, a lot of them wanted to come aboard the New Jersey for their R&R to see the big guns fire. Can you believe that? But I guarantee you, they got a sight. They got a sight. Here you see a couple of Hueys aboard. They brought some guys aboard for R&R, but I've got several pictures where it shows airborne and a couple just sitting, waiting for the next mission to go. This is her battle stars. She earned the Combat Action Ribbon twice during Vietnam. That means she was fired upon. She's got the Navy Commendation and so on. But you can see all her stars. Here you can see the Vietnam ribbons added. And that's her full rack. That's her full rack. Oops, let me go back a couple here. One of my friends, I collect Zippo lighters. If any of you got Zippos from the war, they're valuable. Hang on to them. But I have one of my friends that does Zippo lighters do this for me. It's my ribbons that I earned during over there. Now, after retired from the Navy, Joyce and I were called. I'm a chaplain, by the way. And Joyce and I were called to minister to Vietnamese children. And it was a healing process. We were at Vietnamese Central Baptist Church in Edgewater for 13 years. For 13 years. And enjoyed every minute of it. The Vietnamese are people that, once you get to know them, they are unbelievable. Pardon? No, I don't. And we weren't called there to do that. What they wanted was to have us teach their children in English the Bible. There's some of our kids. We've seen generations grow up, go to college, but they're just precious, precious people. This is one of our last days there before we retired. This is Paula, the pastor's wife, Amy, and then all the kids. I think that's about it. Now, I want to show you some things from the New Jersey that I think would be interesting. I think I'll put this down here. Don't poke my wife's eye out. Okay, first thing I'd like to show you is a piece of teak wood from the New Jersey. When you put a ship in commission, you become a plank owner. And this is a piece of teak wood. It's about 1 inch thick off the Big J. I went to Yardbird, who's replacing a lot of the teak wood while we're still in Philadelphia. And I said, could I have a piece? He said, yes. So I went and decided, for years I thought I was going to burn it in our fireplace or our wood stove. But I was worried that it was going to get thrown in there, but I managed finally to get it framed not too long ago. But one of my proudest possessions from the Big J, because I was a definite plank owner. By the way, this was her 4th commissioning. One of the gentlemen who was with, his name was Dallas Lloyd. He was a CA Nogren here in Denver. But Dallas did planes like the Enola Gay. He was an artist. I said, Dallas, could you do a battleship? I never did one before. And this is what he did for me. Isn't that beautiful? That's the Big J. It's the only one that exists. I mean, there's other paintings of the Big J, but that's the one he did for me. This was our ship's commissioning picture. This is an actual ship's patch, and they call this a rocker. But a lot of guys I saved them for all my ships. I've got them all framed downstairs, but one thing you always try to do is keep keepsakes from your ship so you can remember them by. When you put a ship in commission, you get what is called a plank owner's certificate. And this one shows me becoming a shellback on the New Jersey and a plank owner on the New Jersey. The shellback, we were leaving the gun line and we were heading for Singapore, and we crossed the equator, and that's an 800 and some odd foot long ship, and we crawled on our hands and knees from the rear of the ship with all these fire hose canvas SWAT things. They were like this long, and as you go by they'd say, are you a polywog or a shellback? I'm a polywog. They'd hit you with that thing, and they did that the entire length of the ship. And then you go up, you remember I was sweeping the horizon with a broom, but you'd go up to the forecastle, and they'd have the royal dentist. He would put some stuff in your mouth that wasn't too good. Then you go through the royal garbage chute. You had to go on your hands and knees. Then you went into the royal shower. But become a shellback is something very special. And we got, who was the golden shellback here? It was, there you go. We've got one guy's been over it 3 times here. But he became a shellback and was able to give the initiation instead of taking it as a polywog. But that was quite an experience. Now, one thing I want to share with you, let me see if I can find the plaque here. Where's the little one? Oh, here it is. I'm an eBay man. I'm always looking for the New Jersey artifacts, okay? I found this. This is a seal for the USS New Jersey for Vietnam. And it's presented to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in appreciation May 1968. What happened here was the commanding officer, Schneider, wanted to give the shipyard a special recognition for putting the Big J back in commission. And this plaque ended up being discarded. Somebody put it on eBay, and I found it. Treasured item for me. And that's something that I had nothing to do with, but this I did. When we fired our first mission in Vietnam, Captain Schneider came up to Signal Bridge and said, I was a CO, he said to me, I would like to have the flag that's flying when we fire our first mission since Korea. And I said, you got it. So I gave him, that morning, I gave him this note. This ensign was flown from the mast of the USS New Jersey from midnight to 0600 while New Jersey was conducting shore bombarding against the Viet Cong. Well, I see this come up on eBay, this note. I said, what's going on here? And so I went ahead and and looked at it and found out that, to give you an idea here, David Graham was the head of the American Battleship Association. He was a signalman. He was a battle wagon sailor. And to make a long story short, he was very instrumental in seeing a battleship activated for Vietnam. And what Captain Schneider wanted to do was to give David this flag that we flew on our first firing mission. Here it ends up in eBay. And I'm just blown away. Let me read the letter that Captain Schneider wrote. Dear Senior Chief Graham, warmest holiday greeting to you, Mrs. Graham, and all the members of the American Battleship Association, from the officers and the men of the USS New Jersey. Your enthusiastic support during the past year has contributed greatly to our comfort and well-being. I cannot think of a more fitting representation of our esteem and appreciation of the ABA efforts than the enclosed battle colors. Early morning of 30 September 1968, when she first engaged the enemy in this, her third major conflict. It gives me great pleasure to present them to the American Battle Association on behalf of all the officers and men of the USS New Jersey. This is what the flag, I never saw this letter, by the way. And this is the actual ensign that was flown the first time she fired in Vietnam. You talk about something being precious. What am I going to do with it? Maybe I'll ask you. I was thinking of donating it to the USS New Jersey. She is a museum in Camden, New Jersey. I'm not sure yet. But I do know that it was fate that who issued this to Captain Schneider so many years ago, and now it's back in my possession again. You know, I'll pass that around for you at least a touch, okay? All right, I want to share a story and I'll be done. We're on the gun line one night. And by the way, a battleship is sometimes called what? Battle wagon. One of the most common things is what? Dreadnought. Dreadnought. That was kind of a British phrase. We're on the gun line, and when we would go on watch as a signalman, we had to put in our palm a 3-letter challenge and a 3-letter reply. Okay? So if a ship sent, say, Alpha Zulu Charlie to me, well, that's the correct challenge. I would then go to the officer of the deck, say, sir, I've been challenged by a ship off of our port or starboard bow, request permission to give the correct response. And he would grant it. By the way, when a ship challenges you by flashing light, he's saying that his guns are ready, that he's ready to fire upon you. And that's why signalmen need to be so alert to what's going on in a wartime situation. Permission granted. So I gave him the correct reply. Hour later, another challenge comes in. Officer deck requests permission to answer the challenge to ship, da-da-da-da-da-da. Permission granted. Captain Schneider's on the bridge this whole time. Hour later, same challenge comes in. I again give the correct reply. But then Captain Schneider came up to me and says, here, I want you to send this message. Fire at will. Fear God. Dread not. That's in the Naval Archives, by the way. You know, guys that study naval history now can read that. And I was able to send that one by flashing light. Fear God. Fire at will. Dread not. Now, I remember one time I was in a choir, and I made a comment to somebody sitting next to me that some of the people here look like dreadnoughts. The way they were shaped in their robes, choir robes. And somebody knew what a dreadnought was, so I never used that phrase again. So, but is there any questions about the Big J?
How many 16-inch rounds did it carry?
You know, I don't know as far as how many they would carry. We had, and I might say this, there was one target we were after. It was supposed to be an ammunition dump that the Viet Cong had. And they fired at least 20 rounds at this with armor piercing. We had white phosphorus, we had them all. We could not penetrate it. It was kind of at the top of the mountain. And all of a sudden our spotter yelled out through the intercom, hole in one. And what had happened is one of our 16-inch shells had stopped short of this bunker or this cave and then slid in, and the whole top of the mountain blew off. I mean, it was just incredible. I'll never forget that sight as long as I live. And one of the things, too, I might mention, our spotters in Vietnam were used to heavy cruisers. they had 8-inch guns. The Newport News is a good example. That's one we relieved over there. Our biggest problem, and we had, a ship has CIC, Combat Intelligence Center, but the New Jersey for the 16-inch guns had something else that was below on the signal bridge called Triple C, Captain's Command Center. And all the 16-inch gun missions were coordinated out of that particular facility. And I could walk in there to route a message or to get a message, and I would constantly hear them over the 1MC saying, request you, in code now, but request you reevaluate Firepower New Jersey. Because they had never dealt with a 16-inch gun before. And as a result, there were a lot of targets that were, we changed mountaintops, we sunk beaches. I mean, that kind of an effect it had. This ship, when it fired, it was right on every time. It had one of the earliest computers by man that was ever made, was on these 16-inch guns. And I've talked to many guys at the Vietnam Veterans of America, just through eBay and buying things, that have brought in fire from us. And they said it'll scare you half to death. He said, these things, when they go over your head, it sounds like a freight train. And when it hits that target, it is huge. And I remember one Marine who called in his first firing mission. He didn't know he was dealing with the New Jersey, and he called it in too close. He said, John, he was communicating with me on eBay. He said, John, that was so close, every hair on our head stood up. And he said, I never used the New Jersey again. So another thing I just heard recently at the Vietnam Veterans of America, where artillery in country was all booked up. And the New Jersey came over the radio, says, what's your coordinates? He had no idea who he was talking to. And they launched 2 or 3 shells, and the enemy was gone. But again, she saved a lot of pilots' lives, and I was proud to have served on her. Any other questions?
Just a comment. I was in the Navy during Korea, and we were coming back from Liberty, Sasebo, Japan, and the 7th Fleet had come in while we were on the beach, and it was the whole 7th Fleet in the harbor. And that next to me said, what the hell was that? And I said, that's the New Jersey.
Yeah.
Because you could tell by the bulbous bow where the 40 millimeters were. And most of the guys had never seen one.
Yeah. When you saw it, you just stood in awe.
I also had an acquaintance that was in the Army during Vietnam, and they experienced fire from New Jersey. And he said when they quit firing, the whole forest was gone in front of us where we hit the Newport.
Yeah.
He said it was just, he loved the New Jersey.
Well, we, my wife and I, was mostly letters, and she'll change the story a little bit, but when you're in the combat zone, you don't get much mail. So why write mail if you're not going to have it sent out? And I wasn't getting letters from her. Well, she's not going to write me, I'm not going to write her. But there were other guys getting slow mail. It is not made the regular mail. And one day I get like 20, 30 letters at one time, and I felt bad. But on tape, I've got her on tape saying that I should have written you more faithfully. So, but mail call was a big thing. Here's your 7th Fleet from Vietnam patch that we wore a lot of times on our utility jackets. This one is the CTF 77 from Vietnam. That was Yankee Station. That's where we did all of our flight ops and our naval gunfire support. This is USS 7 Fleet, US 7 Fleet ready to serve, but that's one of the patches that we would have had over there. And last but not least, we're all famous members of the Tonkin Golf Yacht Club. Maybe you've heard of it before, but on Facebook it says this is not your normal yacht club. So they kind of warned you about that. But again, what I was on the Agerholm when I got my orders in New Jersey. I was on watch, and the radioman came up and said, hey, you're going to pre-com school for the New Jersey. And I was so excited. You know, and again, when my lunch break, I'd go home and I'd listen to Victory at Sea movies, records, and the album was the USS Missouri firing her large 16-inch gun. I was determined to get in the Navy. And, you know, to make a long story short, it came true. that day on the signal bridge. So, any other questions about the Big J?
Now the question to talk a little bit more about Lebanon. You mentioned
Yeah, Beirut, Lebanon. She did.
that yes, a battleship served there.
Yes.
And so from the French Navy, we had reports that combatants in Lebanon were frightened to death by battleship gunfire. For you to know, Lebanon is a very small country. The battleship could cover anywhere in the country. Once they experience one shell, they are very experienced combatants. They are used to gunfire, but not that big.
Yeah, she was very active in Lebanon, Kosovo, and you know, they took her out before Desert Storm. But the bottom line is she did serve in 4 wars, and she's our most decorated Navy battleship. She might be one of our most decorated Navy ships. I had an opportunity to do a crew swap with HMAS Perth, Australian destroyer that we made. And so 17 of us went to the Perth, and 17 of their people came to the New Jersey. So I got to watch the New Jersey from a distance fire. And it was something to behold, to see those guns go off. You know, something I'll never forget. And by the way, the Australian Navy served Foster's beer every night. Not rum, but Foster's beer. And the cans were like that. Well, I wasn't a drinker at the time, but I would sell my can for mega bucks, you know, so. And I still have the can somewhere. Did I throw it out? Yeah. But anyways, any other questions?
No, it's just too many moves.
You have to stay inside the ship when they fire the big guns due to concussion.
Yeah, of course, let me say, one of the misconceptions about a battleship, it's the 5-inch 38 guns that are louder. They crack. I get a 10% hearing disability because of chipping paint with these pneumatic hammers and those 5-inch 38 guns. But that was the loud ones. When the 60-inch guns fired, it was a distant concussion or a distant sound. So it wasn't as bad. They would always give you a warning. They wouldn't want anybody out on the decks when they're firing these guns. But they would sound the ooga horn twice. Ooga, ooga. And you count 1001, 1002, 1003, and you could literally watch the shells leave the barrel, as you saw in Neil Leifer's picture when it was in the air. But you could see the shells leave the barrel until they went out of sight. Now the guys in country couldn't see them, but they could hear them. So, but again, it was one thing I didn't share with you. The Yardbirds in Philadelphia had made a lot of what we call darkened ship spaces. And what a darkened ship space is on a destroyer, on a battle wagon, is you open a hatch, you go in, you shut the hatch, you go into the main body of the ship through another hatch. It's to keep all light out. Well, the Yardbirds, our steel on those bulkheads outside were like that. And they decided to make the darkened ship added features to the superstructure out of aluminum. And you can imagine what happened if you remember the lockers and the flag bridge. You can imagine what happened first time they fired those guns. Warped them all. They had to replace them. So, and I showed you when she was on sea trials, one of the things the signalman would do, if we successfully passed all of our sea trials, we would run a broom upside down on the yard arm that we passed them. So, anything else? By the way, we did go through the Panama Canal. It was a tight ship. I was talking to somebody from the USS Detroit, said they couldn't fit in it. I was surprised at that because the battle wagon is so wide. But they took all the rubber items along the ship to prevent it from bumpers, to prevent it from scraping. They had to take them off because it was such a tight fit. And what happened was we took her from Norfolk, where we took on some 16-inch, through the Panama, came into Long Beach. The Queen Mary was docked there at the time as a museum ship. And I fled to Colorado to marry my wife. And then we were married, 2 months? And it was back to Vietnam again. But I did 4 tours over there on the Porterfield, the Agarholm, the Morton, and the Big J. So all naval gunfire support. Did I answer your question, though? Great. Anything else?
How did your parents feel about you joining up before your senior year?
They signed the papers. They knew I wanted to go Navy. And by the way, I might mention something. On the USS Agerholm, my brother joined me on the signal bridge in the combat area. Remember we looked at the 5 Sullivans? All 5 brothers died? My dad got upset at that. So he wrote the Navy Department and asked, why is my sons on the same ship in the same duty section on a U.S. Navy destroyer? And you know what the Navy Department wrote back? It's not a declared war. So the Sullivan Act does not pertain to this. So, anything else before I sit down? Thank you so much.
Just one more thing. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And John, thank you. I wanted to present to you real quick a Museum Challenge coin for your presentation. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
By the way, Vietnam veterans, the VVA is not a drinking place. We do veteran work. And if you're a Vietnam veteran and haven't joined our unit yet, you need to come down and see us. We just laid 30 unclaimed veterans, identified, but just on a shelf. There's 600 and some odd of them that we still have to identify as veterans. We just laid them to rest on June 25th, 30 of them with full military honors. One was as old as 1953 that had been abandoned for that long. They knew who they were, their cremated remains, but they didn't have nobody could claim them at death. So they just sat on a shelf. And we're doing another 30 in the fall. But we'll put you to work doing some great things. Our motto is never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. But I'd encourage you, if you're a Vietnam veteran, come out and see us. You're going to be impressed with what we do there. Thank you again.
Thank you.